The young financial manager was doing quite well. She had an MBA, an impressive job, and plans to retire before she was 40. She was aggressive and ambitious. She thought a 40-hour work week was such a good idea, she worked 2 of them. Life was pretty much work. Not much time for relationships. A friend from college convinced her to take a weekend off, which was rare in her life. They went out of town, and another rare event, they went to a play. The play was called Simple Fantasies. Little Things We Hope For was the subject. And she ran through a list of wishes in her mind. She decided that her fantasy would be to have a copy of the Wall Street Journal 1 year in the future. It was a fun weekend, but she found herself very eager to get back home and get back to work. On Sunday night, she woke up in the middle of a strange dream. It was an upsetting dream. There was a ghostly figure that appeared, and all it said was, "Yes, yes." She found herself not being able to get back to sleep, so she finally dressed, and she was at the office well before 6. The early mail came in, and she glanced at it, but she was still trying to get caught up from her weekend off. It was not until late morning that she did pick up her mail, and one of those items was a Wall Street Journal. She noticed that it appeared a bit odd. The stories were strange. They were about unfamiliar events. When she glanced at the date, it made sense. If you can make sense out of getting a newspaper from a year in the future. It gave her a big chill, and she sat back in her chair and didn't really do much of anything for about 10 minutes. Then she shut and locked her office door and silenced her phones and began to pore over the stock reports and the commodity information and the precious metal prices a year hence. She took copious notes the rest of the day, and she began to draw out plans for a series of stock purchases and sales. It was not unusual for her to keep to herself, and she was able to avoid seeing anyone that day until she headed home that evening. The precious newspaper was locked in her briefcase. On the way home, she allowed herself to dream a bit about that comfortable and luxurious life that was a year ahead. A villa in Tuscany, an apartment in Paris. She fixed a quick supper and resumed her calculations. It was late when she finally relaxed a bit and lay on the couch to read through some of the journal articles. News of future events, columns that tried to bring insight to business leaders a year ahead of time. She was nearly asleep when on page 21 she saw what proved to be the most significant item of news for that day. It was her obituary. From the Gospel of Luke, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who sent me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, I'll do this. I'll pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, be merry. But God said to him, You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God. There are 37 parables in the New Testament. I am sure this is nobody's favorite one. We like the parable of the Good Shepherd, the parable of the prodigal son, for there are happy endings, but not this one. This is not a happy ending at all. Rather than acceptance by God, the parable ends with condemnation. In the Greek language that we find the original manuscripts of this parable, 18 of the 54 words are first-person words like I and me and mine. The parable does not say that this man was unethical or unfair. He was just maybe part of that cultural attitude that encourages a life of ceaseless acquisition as a kind of moral good. Some of us are old enough to remember Jack Benny. First a radio show and then a TV show, and Jack Benny tried to cultivate this reputation that he was the stingiest man on the planet. And one of the sketches, there was a robber that points a gun at him and says to Jack, "Hey bud, your money or your life?" And he gets no reply. So he says again, "Hey bud, your money or your life?" And Jack Benny replies, "Don't rush me, I'm thinking." Jesus invites us to hear a story about greed, about an immoderate love of possession. Enough is never enough. But it's not always about stuff. Even after some people are well established in their field, they feel insufficiently recognized. Children feel like they can never score enough goals or points in sports. And they can never get enough straight A's. You may have encountered someone who you said to them in appreciation, "I can't thank you enough." And what if they said, "Oh, go ahead and try"? We just can't get into these ruts of never being satisfied, being greedy for more of whatever it is. There was a bright and troubled young writer named David Foster Wallace. Spoke at a 2005 commencement address and said, "In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there's actually no such thing as atheism. Everybody worships. The only choice we get to make is, what do we worship? And pretty much everything you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. If you worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, you will always feel ugly, and when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. Worship power, and you will feel weak and afraid, and you will need even more power over others to keep that fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, and always on the verge of being found out. I think that we might look at that and reflect, he didn't say this, but people without a vital faith will always feel empty. What will we leave behind? My children, I may have mentioned this before, my children hope that I live long enough to clean out my garage. I do not want them to get the task of all the stuff that I have collected. Oh, I might need that. Oh, yeah, this could come in handy. And yeah, well, you know where I'm coming from. Preaching professor Barbara Lundbad said, following Jesus calls us beyond ourselves. And Jesus' call usually has economic implications. We must see beyond the border of our fields, our bank accounts, our investments, and to have a truly abundant life. Jesus concludes his lesson with an exhortation to be rich toward God. Well, that's a beautiful and inspiring phrase, but what exactly does it mean to be rich toward God? What does a heart and a lifestyle and a home and a bank account rich toward God look like? Well, maybe it would mean guarding against greed instead of obsessing over fairness. After all, this started with someone hollering out, "Hey, Jesus," like it's a cover band and they're hollering out songs. Hey, play Freebird. Someone in the crowd said, "Hey, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." And Jesus does not get involved in that. It was common for people to take questions like this to rabbis because they were wise and they could help people sort things out. But his response was, "Well, friend, who sets me to be a judge over you?" Maybe it's more than fairness. And he tells his parable, the parable that nobody really likes, because it hits so close to home. Maybe it means guarding against greed instead of obsessing over fairness. Maybe it means holding our mortality closer than we want to. You know, the fact that none of us are going to make it out of this world alive, it doesn't seem to have much implication on how we plan things. Many people die without a will. Many people make no provisions for what will happen with what they've accumulated. Maybe it means holding our mortality closer than we want to. Maybe it means asking hard questions about what makes us feel secure or insecure. Oh, we all will admit our stuff makes us feel secure, doesn't it? You know, I mean, nobody wants to be homeless. Nobody wants to worry about where the next meal is going to be coming from. Nobody wants to wear the same clothes all the time without being able to wash and change them. I mean, our stuff is not simply a luxury, it's kind of like a necessity, but is that what makes us feel secure? Maybe it means that acknowledging our hard-earned, well-earned, self-earned wealth comes from God and belongs to God. Maybe rich toward God means prioritizing human interconnectedness over personal gain or assets management. Maybe it means dialoguing with God more than we monologue with ourselves. Maybe it means holding human wisdom lightly, knowing that God's wisdom will almost always render our own foolish. The words at the end of the parable in which God calls this man fool or stinging. I've looked up and I see the word fool or fools or foolish or foolishness. That word is used in our English New Testament 36 times. But there are only 2 times in the Gospels that the word fool is actually used. One in this parable, and one is a warning not to call anybody a fool. We are left with an unpleasant parable and a question of, what does it mean to be rich toward God? Is that not one of the reasons that you are here today, to sort that out? To find that if you seek out worship and fellowship with other Christians, that they will help you sort out what it means. That as we are gathered and share in worship and scripture and song, that we are lifted above the ordinary so that what we have, most importantly, is not around us, but here. God bless you in sorting that out in your life.